Good morrow, scholars. Welcome back to Life and Death, Twilight Reimagined, for once I said the title correctly. This is my cat Frida. She's actually my brother's cat, but since he's not here anymore, I'm her replacement. We're on Chapter 3, if I remember correctly. She was laughing. Yes, we are in Chapter 3. When I opened my eyes in the morning, something was different. It was the light. It was still the gloomy light of a cloudy day in the forest, but it was clearer somehow. I realized there was no fog obscuring my window. I jumped up to look outside and then groaned. A fine layer of snow covered the yard, dusted the top of my truck, and whitened the road. But that wasn't the worst part. All the rain from yesterday had frozen solid, coating the needles on the trees in crazy patterns and making the driveway a deadly ice slick. I also have this problem. I had enough trouble not falling down when the ground was dry. It might be safer for me to go back to bed now. Charlie had left for work before I got downstairs. In a lot of ways, living with Charlie was like having my own place, and I found myself enjoying the space rather than feeling lonely. I threw down a quick bowl of cereal and some orange juice from the carton. I felt excited to go to school, and that worried me. I knew it wasn't the stimulating learning environment I was anticipating, or seeing my new set of friends. If I was being honest with myself, I knew I was eager to get to school because I would see Edith Cullen, and that was very, very stupid. Maybe a few of the other girls were intrigued by the novelty of the new kid, but Edith wasn't a Michaela or an Erica. I was well aware that my league and her league were spheres that did not touch. I was already worried that just looking at her face was giving me an unrealistic expectation that would haunt me for the rest of my life. Spending more time looking at her, watching her lips move, marveling at her skin, listening to her voice, was certainly not going to help with that. I didn't exactly trust her anyway. Why lie about her eyes? And of course, there was a whole thing where she might have at one point wanted me dead. So I should definitely not be excited to see her again. It took every ounce of my concentration to make it down the icy brick driveway alive. I almost lost my balance when I finally got to the truck, but I managed to cling to the side mirror and save myself. The sidewalks at school would be complex today, so much potential for humiliation. My truck seemed to have no problem with the black ice that covered the roads. I drove very slowly, though, not wanting to carve a path of destruction through Main Street. When I got out of my truck at school, I discovered why it had so little trouble. Something silver caught my eye, and I walked to the back of the truck, carefully holding the side for support, to examine my tires. There were thin chains crisscrossed in diamond shapes around them. Charlie had gotten up who knows how early to put snow chains on my truck. I frowned, surprised that my throat suddenly felt tight. That wasn't the way it was supposed to work. I probably should have been the one to think about putting chains on his tires, if I could figure out how to do that. Or at least I should have helped him with the chore. It wasn't his job. Except that, actually, it kind of was. He was the parent. He was taking care of me, his son. That was how it worked in books and on TV shows, but it made me feel upside down in a strange way. I was standing by the back corner of the truck, struggling to contain the sudden wave of emotion the snow chains had brought on, when I heard a strange sound. Oh no. It was a high-pitched screech, and almost as soon as I registered it, the sound was already painfully loud. I looked up, startled. I'm so startled. I saw several things simultaneously. Nothing was moving in slow motion the way it does in the movies. Instead, the adrenaline rush seemed to make my brain work faster, and I was able to absorb in clear detail a few things all at once. Edith Cullen was standing 4 cars down from me, mouth open in horror. Her face stood out from a sea of faces, all frozen in the same mask of shock. Also, a dark blue van was skidding, tires locked and squealing against the brakes, spinning wildly across the ice of the parking lot. It was going to hit the back corner of my truck, and I was standing between them. I didn't even have time to close my eyes. Just before I heard the shattering crunch of the van folding around the truck bed, something hit me, hard, but not from the direction I was expecting. My head cracked against the icy blacktop, and I felt something solid and cold pinning me to the ground. I realized I was lying on the pavement behind the tan car I'd parked next to, but I didn't have a chance to notice anything else because the van was still coming. It had curled gratingly around the end of the truck, and still spinning and sliding, it was about to collide with me again. "Come on," she said, the words so quickly I almost missed them. But the voice was impossible not to recognize. 2 thin white hands shot out in front of me, and the van shuddered to a stop a foot from my face. Her pale hands fitting exactly into a deep dent in the side of the van's body. Then her hands moved so fast they blurred. One was suddenly gripping under the body of the van, and something was dragging me, swinging my legs around like a rag doll's, till they hit the tire of the tan car. There was a groaning metallic thud so loud it hurt my ears, and the van settled, glass popping onto the asphalt exactly where, a second ago, my legs had been. It was absolutely silent for one long second, and then the screaming started. In the abrupt chaos, I could hear more than one person shouting my name. But more clearly than all the yelling, I could hear Edith Cullen's slow, frantic voice in my ear. "Oh, are you all right? I'm fine." My voice sounded strange. Mine was too. I tried to sit up and realized she was holding me against the side of her body. I must have been more traumatized than I realized because I couldn't budge her arm at all. Was I weak with shock? "Be careful," she warned. "I think you hit your head pretty hard." I became aware of a throbbing ache centered above my left ear. "Ow," I said, surprised. That's what I thought. Nothing seemed funny to me, but it sounded like she was trying not to laugh. How in the... I trailed off, trying to clear my head, get my bearings. "How did you get over here so fast?" "I was standing right next to you, Bo," she said, her voice suddenly serious again. I turned to sit up, and this time she helped me. But then she slid as far from me as she could in the limited space. I looked at her concerned, innocent expression, and was disoriented again by her gold-colored eyes. What was I asking her? And then they found us, a crowd of people with tears streaming down their faces, shouting at each other, shouting at us. I guess seeing someone die would be enough to... "Don't move," someone instructed. "Get Taylor out of the van," someone else shouted. There was a flurry of activity around us. I tried to get up, but Edith's hands pushed my shoulder down. "Just stay put for now." "But it's cold," I complained. It surprised me when she chuckled under her breath. There was an edge to the sound. "You were over there," I suddenly remembered, and her chuckle stopped short. "You were by your car." Her expression hardened abruptly. "No, I wasn't. I saw you." Everything around us was confusion. I could hear the lower voices of adults arriving on the scene, but I stubbornly held on to the argument. I was right, and she was going to admit it. "Bo, I was standing with you, and I pulled you out of the way." She stared at me, and something strange happened. It was like the gold of her eyes turned up, like her eyes were drugging me, hypnotizing me. It was devastating in a weird, exciting way. But her expression was anxious. I thought she was trying to communicate something crucial. "But that's not what happened," I said weakly. The gold in her eyes blazed again. "Please, Bo." "Why?" I asked. "Trust me," she pleaded. I could hear the sirens now. "Will you explain everything to me later?" "Fine," she snapped, suddenly exasperated. "Okay," I mumbled, unable to process her mood swings with everything else I was trying to come to terms with. What was I supposed to think when what I remembered was impossible? It took 6 EMTs and 2 teachers, Miss Varner and Coach Clapp, to shift the van far enough away from us to bring the stretchers in. Edith insisted she hadn't been touched, and I tried to do the same, but she was quick to contradict me. She told them I'd hit my head and then made it sound worse than it was, throwing around words like concussion and hemorrhage. I wanted to die when they put on the neck brace. It looked like the entire school was there, watching soberly as they loaded me into the truck of the ambulance, or in the back. But Edith got to ride in the front. It was 1,000 times more humiliating than I'd imagined today would be, and I hadn't even made it to the sidewalk. To make matters worse, Chief Swan arrived before they could get me away safely. "Whoa!" he yelled in panic when he recognized me on the stretcher. "I'm completely fine, Dad," I sighed. "There's nothing wrong with me." He rounded on the closest EMT for a second opinion. While the EMT tried to talk him down, I tuned them out to consider the jumble of absurd images churning in my head. Images that were not possible. When they lifted me away from the car, I had seen the deep dent in the tan car's bumper, a very distinct dent with the slim shape of Edith's shoulders, as if she had braced herself against the car with enough force to damage the middle frame. And then there was her family looking on from a distance with expressions that ranged from disapproval, Eleanor, to fury, Royal, but held no hint of concern for their little sister's safety. I remembered the sensation of almost flying through the air, that hard mass that pinned me to the ground, Edith's hand under the frame of the van, like it was holding the van off the ground. I tried to think of a logical explanation that could make sense of what I had just seen. All I could come up with was that I was having a psychotic episode. I didn't feel crazy, but maybe crazy people always felt sane. Naturally, the ambulance got a police escort to the county hospital. I felt ridiculous the whole time they were unloading me. What made it worse was Edith simply glided through the hospital doors on her own. They put me in the emergency room, a long room with a line of beds separated by pastel-patterned curtains. The nurse put a pressure cuff on my arm and a thermometer under my tongue. Since no one bothered pulling the curtain around to give me some privacy, I decided I wasn't obligated to wear the embarrassing neck brace anymore. As soon as the nurse walked away, I quickly unfastened the Velcro and threw it under the bed. There was another flurry of hospital personnel, another stretcher brought into the bed next to mine. I recognized Taylor Crowley. I like Crowley from Supernatural. From my government class beneath the bloodstained bandages wrapped tightly around her head. Taylor looked 100 times worse than I felt. But she was staring anxiously at me. "Oh, I'm so sorry." "I'm fine, Taylor. You look awful. That's not something you say to a girl." "Are you all right?" As we spoke, nurses began unwinding her bloody bandages, exposing dozens of shallow slices all over her forehead and left cheek. She ignored me. "I thought I was going to kill you. I was going too fast and I hit the ice wrong." She winced as one nurse started dabbing at her face. "Don't worry about it. You missed me." "How did you get out of the way so fast? You were there and then you were gone." Edith shoved me out of the way?" She looked confused. "Who?" "Edith Cullen. She was standing next to me. As usual, I didn't sound believable at all." "Edith? I didn't see her." "Wow, it was all so fast, I guess. Is she okay?" "I think so. She's here somewhere, but they didn't make her use a stretcher." I knew I wasn't crazy. What had happened? There was no way to explain what I'd seen. They wheeled me away then to x-ray my head. I told them there was nothing wrong, and I was right. Not even a concussion. I asked if I could leave, but the nurse said I had to talk to a doctor first, so I was trapped in the ER. Harassed by Taylor's constant apologies and promises to make it up with me. To me, what? No matter how many times I tried to convince her I was fine, she continued to beg for forgiveness. Finally, I closed my eyes and tried to ignore her. "Is he sleeping?" a musical voice asked. My eyes flew open. Edith was standing at the foot of my bed, her expression more a smirk than a smile. I stared at her, trying to put the pieces together in my head. She didn't look like someone who could stop attacking vehicles with her bare hands, but then she also didn't look like anyone I'd ever seen before. "Hey, Edith, I'm really sorry," Taylor began. Edith lifted a hand to stop her. "No blood, no foul," she said, flashing her bright white teeth. She moved to sit on the edge of Taylor's bed, facing me. She smirked again. "So, what's the verdict?" she asked me. "There's nothing wrong with me, but they won't let me go. How come you aren't strapped to a gurney like the rest of us?" "It's all about who you know, but don't worry, I came to spring you." Then a doctor walked around the corner, and my mouth fell open. She was young, she was blonde, and she was more beautiful than any star I'd ever seen. Like someone sliced up Audrey Hepburn, Grace Kelly, and Marilyn Monroe, took the best parts and glued them together to form one goddess. What? What was that? She was pale, low, and tired-looking, with circles under her dark eyes. From Charlie's description, this had to be Edith's mom. "So, Mr. Swan," Dr. Cullen asked in a gentle voice, "how are you feeling?" "I'm fine," I said, for the last time, I hoped. She walked to the light board on the wall over my head and turned it on. "Your x-rays look good," she said. "Does your head hurt?" Edith said, "You hit it pretty hard." "It's fine," I repeated with a sigh, throwing a quick questioning look Edith's way. She avoided my eyes. The doctor's cool fingers probed lightly along my skull. She noticed when I winced. "Tender?" she asked. "Not really. I'd had worse." I heard a low laugh and looked over to see Edith smiling. "Well, your father is in the waiting room. You can go home with him now, but come back if you feel dizzy or have trouble with your eyesight at all." "Can't I go back to school?" I asked, imagining Charlie trying to play nurse. "Maybe you should take it easy today." I glanced at Edith. "Does she get to go to school?" "Someone has to spread the good news that we survived," Edith said bravely. "Actually," Dr. Cullen corrected, "most of the school seems to be in the waiting room." "Ugh," I moaned, rather. Dr. Cullen raised her eyebrows. "Do you want to stay?" "No, no!" I insisted, throwing my legs over the side of the bed and hopping down quickly. Too quickly. I staggered, and Dr. Cullen caught me. She was sturdier than she looked. "I'm fine," I assured her again. No need to explain that my balance problems had nothing to do with hitting my head. "Take some Tylenol for the pain," she suggested as she steadied me. "I prefer Advil." That wasn't an endorsement. "It doesn't hurt that bad," I insisted. "It sounds like you were extremely lucky," Dr. Cullen said, smiling as she signed my chart with a flourish. "Lucky Edith just happened to be standing next to me," I amended, shooting another glance at the subject of my statement. "Oh, well, yes," Dr. Cullen agreed, suddenly occupied with the papers in front of her. Then she looked away at Taylor and walked to the next bed. It made me sure the doctor was in on it. "I'm afraid you'll have to stay with us just a little bit longer," she said to Taylor and began checking her cuts. As soon as the doctor's back was turned, I moved to Edith's side. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I whispered under my breath. I should have whispered. She took a step back from me, her jaw suddenly clenched. "Your father is waiting for you," she said through her teeth. I glanced at Dr. Cullen and Taylor. "I need to speak with you alone," I pressed. She glared, but it wasn't the same as that first day, not nearly as homicidal, so I just waited. After a second, she turned her back and stalked quickly down the long room. Long as my legs were, I nearly had to run to keep up. As soon as we turned the corner into a short hallway, she spun around to face me. "What do you want?" she asked, sounding annoyed. That sounded like my mom. Let's see, where was I? Her eyes were cold, her unfriendliness intimidated me. My words came out with less certainty than I'd planned. "You owe me an explanation," I reminded her. "I saved your life. I don't owe you anything." I flinched back from the resentment in her voice. "Why are you acting like this? Oh, you hit your head. You don't know what you're talking about." Her tone was cutting. Her anger only made me more sure that I was right, though. "There's nothing wrong with my head." She turned up the heat of her glare. "What do you want from me, Bo? I want to know the truth." "You can't handle the truth," I said. "I want to know why I'm lying for you." "What do you think happened?" she snapped. It was harder to say the words out loud, but I could hear the crazy. It shook my conviction, but I tried to keep my voice even and calm. "I know you weren't standing next to me. Taylor didn't see you either, so it's not a concussion damage. That van was going to crush us both, but it didn't. It looked like your hands left dents in the side of it, and your shoulders left a dent in the other car, but you're not hurt at all. The van should have smashed my legs, but you were holding it up." It just kept sounding worse and worse. I couldn't continue. She was staring at me, her eyes wide and incredulous, but she couldn't entirely hide the tension, the defensiveness. "You think I lifted a van off of you?" Her tone questioned my sanity, but there was something off. It was like a line delivered by a skilled actor, so hard to doubt, but at the same time the frame of the movie screen reminded you nothing was actually real. I just nodded once. She smiled hard and mocking. "Nobody will believe that, you know. I'm not going to tell anybody." Surprise flitted across her face. That reminds me of... Anyway. And the smile faded. "Then why does it matter?" "It matters to me," I said. "I don't like to lie, so there better be a good reason why I'm doing it. Can you just thank me and get over it?" "Thank you," I said, then folded my arms, waiting. "You're not going to let it go, are you?" "I wouldn't either. I'm like a raccoon." "Nope." "In that case, I hope you enjoy disappointment." "I do." She scowled at me, and I stared back, thoughts scattered by how beautiful her anger was. I was the first to speak, trying to keep myself focused. I was in danger of being totally distracted. It was like trying to stare down a destroying angel. "If you were going to be like this about it, why did you even bother?" She paused, and for a brief moment her perfect face was unexpectedly vulnerable. "I don't know," she whispered. And then she turned her back on me and walked away. It took me a few minutes until I was able to move. When I could walk, I made my way slowly to the exit at the end of the hallway. The waiting room was unpleasant, like I'd expected. It seemed like every face I knew in Forks was here, staring at me. Charlie rushed to my side, and I put up my hands. "There's nothing wrong with me," I assured him, abruptly aggravated by the whole crazy situation. "What did the doctor say?" "Dr. Cullen saw me, and she said I was fine and I could go home." Michaela, Jeremy, and Erica were all there, beginning to converge on us. "Let's go," I urged. Charlie put one arm out toward me, like he thought I needed support. I retreated quickly toward the exit doors, waving half-heartedly at my friends. Hopefully they would forget about this by tomorrow. Unlikely. It was a huge relief, the first time I'd ever felt that way, to get into the cruiser. We drove in silence. I was so wrapped up in my thoughts that I barely knew Charlie was there. I was positive that Edith's defensive behavior in the hall was a confirmation of the bizarre things I still could hardly believe I'd seen. When we got to the house, Charlie finally spoke. You'll need to call Renee." He hung his head, guilty. I was appalled. "You told Mom?" "Sorry." I slammed the cruiser's door a little harder than necessary on my way out. My mom was in hysterics, of course. I had to tell her I felt fine at least 30 times before she would calm down. She begged me to come home, forgetting the fact that home was empty at the moment, but her pleas were easier to resist than I would have thought. I was consumed by the mystery Edith presented, and more than a little obsessed with Edith herself. Stupid, stupid, stupid. I wasn't eager to escape Forks as I should be, as any normal, sane person would be. I decided I might as well go to bed early that night. Charlie continued to watch me anxiously, and it was getting on my nerves. I stopped on my way to grab 3 Tylenol from the bathroom. They did help, and the pain eased. I drifted to sleep. That was the first night I dreamed about Edith Cullen. That was a little bit shorter than the other one. However, I don't want to do more than one chapter at a time. Let me know what you guys think. If I need to work on my enunciation, my inflections. Should I read ahead a little bit beforehand so I know how I want to read it when I record it? Or do you guys prefer that I read in real time for you guys while I'm recording. Let me know what you prefer, and I'll do my best to accommodate. This one should be going up in about 10 minutes from when I recorded it, so I guess you wouldn't know no matter what. Thanks you guys for watching. If you have any other tips or suggestions, anything you'd like to see me read or not read, or if I should kill myself, whatever, let me know. But until next time, bye everybody.